Hi, everyone. Welcome to ID Radio, your go-to podcast for the latest research and essential papers on infectious diseases.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are wrestling with one of the most persistent and uh, critical public health riddles. How effective is the seasonal flu vaccine when the virus decides to evolve right out from under us?
It's the annual game of molecular catch-up, isn't it? And this year, the scoreboard is particularly interesting.
It really is. And the sources you've shared, they take us straight to the front lines. We're looking at early real-world data coming out of Beijing.
That's right. Specifically on the effectiveness of the 2025-26 vaccine. The mission here was really acute. Evaluate the protection against a specific, rapidly emerging and frankly a worrying new player influenza A H3N2 subclade K.
Okay, so let's unpack this right from the start. Why was the subclade K causing such immediate concern? When scientists first spot something like this, what are the red flags?
Well, the alarm bells rang for two main reasons. First, the timing and its dominance. This thing became the primary strain very, very quickly in the Northern Hemisphere.
And it started early, right?
Unusually early. We're talking September in places like Beijing. That kind of rapid spread is always potential trouble. But the core concern really came from the virology.
What did that show?
Subclade K carried multiple amino acid substitutions in its hemagglutinin and its HA protein when they compared it to the recommended vaccine strain.
So the HA protein is the part the vaccine teaches our body to recognize. And if that part is changing dramatically, the experts were worried about immune escape before the season even really began.
Exactly. It sounded like a guaranteed mismatch. You had this dominant strain that looked genetically different from what the vaccine was designed to target.
So the mission of this Beijing study was to cut through that theoretical concern with hard, real-world data.
Precisely. Did that genetic divergence actually translate into a lack of protection on the ground? That was the question.
So let's jump right in. The initial virological reality in Beijing, did this subclade K truly dominate?
Oh, absolutely. The dominance was stark.
Yeah.
Out of all the sequenced H3N2 samples they looked at, a huge majority, 84.8%, belonged to subclade K.
Wow. So there's no question they were measuring the vaccine against the right threat.
None at all. And the antigenic divergence? I mean, did the lab work confirm the virus was functionally different?
Yeah, that's the key.
It did, and with worrying clarity. They recovered 67 virus isolates, and 65 of those, a staggering 97.0%, showed reduced reactivity to the vaccine strain.
97%.
Yeah.
That is undisputed confirmation of antigenic drift.
It is. The initial worries about immune escape were completely justified based on what the virus looked like in a petri dish.
You mentioned specific changes in the HA protein. Can you give us a sense of how extensive those were without, getting us bogged down in the molecular biology?
Sure. Think of it like this. The HA protein is a key, and our immune system has the lock. This virus didn't just file off one tiny corner of the key. It changed the shape in multiple places. It really shows how rapid and specific the evolution of this subclade was.
So if that's the viral reality, what about the human element? Who was getting sick? The study started earlier than usual, September to mid-December. Did that change the picture?
It definitely did, and this is crucial for understanding the final numbers. There was a very notable demographic shift. School-aged children, so those aged 6 to 17, they accounted for a huge proportion of the positive cases.
How huge?
We're talking 40.7% of the positive cases, compared to only about 22.4% of the test-negative controls.
Wait, so that's almost doubled the concentration in that age group compared to the general sick population? Why there?
The study suggests it was largely driven by frequent school-based outbreaks. Schools are just really efficient amplifiers for transmission.
And that demographic concentration, I imagine, becomes critical when we start looking at the raw numbers, especially with Beijing's vaccination policy.
Absolutely critical. And that leads us perfectly into the methodology and what we could call the aha moment of adjustment.
So they used the standard test-negative design. Before we get to the adjusted numbers, what did the raw data, the unadjusted findings, actually say?
And this is the part that often causes confusion. The initial, crude, unadjusted vaccine effectiveness estimate was negative.
Negative.
Minus 6.4%.
Negative 6%. That's a shocking number on the surface. If you saw that flash across the news, you'd think the vaccine was useless or worse.
Exactly. You'd think it was making people more susceptible. But this is a textbook example of why we need proper epidemiological adjustment. It's a statistical mirage.
Okay, so walk us through why that happened. How can a vaccine produce a negative number like that?
It all boils down to the bias from the demographics and the testing. So we just said School-age children were the group most likely to be sick and get tested, right?
Right.
Well, because of the free vaccination policy in Beijing, that same group also had the highest vaccination coverage. 36% of the actual cases were vaccinated.
Ah, I see. So you have this big pool of vaccinated kids, but the only ones showing up at the clinic are the ones who got sick anyway.
Yeah.
And because that whole age group has high vaccination rates, the sheer number of vaccinated people showing up as cases just tanks the raw calculation.
You've got it. The unadjusted data inflated the rate of vaccinated people among the sick, artificially driving the VE estimate into the negative.
Which makes the statistical work they did next absolutely vital. What did they adjust for?
They adjusted for several key covariates like age, sex, underlying comorbidities where they lived, and critically the calendar week to account for changes over time.
So after stripping away all that statistical noise, what was the real number?
Once they accounted for those factors, the overall adjusted VE jumped to 41.3%.
41%.
41.3. And the confidence interval was solid, so it's a firm finding.
So you go from -6 to +41. That is moderate protection, which, like you said, is pretty remarkable given the antigenic mismatch.
It's a critical, high-impact takeaway. Even with confirmed drift, it still provided a substantial real-world benefit. And specifically against H3N2, the dominant threat, the adjusted VE, was 39.9%.
So now that we have that overall number, let's get into the nuances, because the protection wasn't the same for everyone.
No, not at all. The variation across age groups is maybe the most compelling part of this.
Let's start with the very youngest, the kids 5 and under. They saw the strongest protection, didn't they?
They did. The adjusted VE for children 5 and under was a very robust 70.9%.
70%? That's fantastic.
It is. It reflects a really good immune response in that age group when they're first exposed to these antigens through vaccination.
Okay, then we have the group that was driving the epidemic, the school-aged kids 6 to 17.
Their VE was moderate, 37.4%. Still protective, but a big drop from the younger group.
And then the working adults 18 to 59, that was an interesting one.
It was. They actually showed quite strong protection at 53.1%.
53% is higher than the overall average, but there's a big caveat there, isn't there, about the coverage?
A very important one, yes. While the efficacy was high, the vaccination coverage in this group was just very low. Only 2.4% of cases and about 5% of controls were vaccinated.
So it's a smaller, maybe self-selecting group of people. We can't really extrapolate that 53% to all adults.
Yeah, we'll have to be very cautious, yes.
And finally, the group most vulnerable to severe outcomes. Older adults, 60 and over, how did they fare?
Unfortunately, they saw the lowest adjusted VE. It was 25.3%.
25%. And the confidence interval on that was wide, I assume.
It was wide, reflecting some uncertainty, but the overall picture was still one of low protection.
You see that massive gulf between almost 71% for the youngest kids and 25% for older adults. That's where public health policy really needs to pivot.
That's the critical link. The study immediately connects this lower VE to what we already know about immunosenescence, how immunity naturally wanes with age. And the source suggests for this group, this finding just underscores the need for enhanced formulations.
The high-dose vaccines, the adjuvanted vaccines.
Exactly. The ones that have been shown to generate better immune responses in this specific age group. This Beijing data really validates that specialized approach. It shows where standard protection starts to fail when the virus drifts.
Absolutely. Okay, let's pivot now to a concept that always seems to cause confusion, even among researchers.
Yeah.
Repeated vaccination. Does getting the shot every single year help or hurt?
This is maybe the most nuanced finding in the whole paper. They compared VE based on whether people got the shot in the current season only or in both the current and the previous season.
Let's break down those numbers carefully.
Okay, so people vaccinated in the current season only had an adjusted VE of 45.3%.
Very good.
Right. But individuals vaccinated in both the current and the previous seasons had a lower point estimate, 32.5%.
So it looks like getting vaccinated the year before actually dampened this year's response by about 13 points. That seems so counterintuitive.
It is counterintuitive. And this is where we have to stress the nuance, just like the study authors did. The confidence intervals for those two estimates, they were wide and they were overlapping.
Meaning, statistically, we can't actually say that difference is real. It might just be chance.
Precisely. We don't have conclusive proof of attenuation here. But the possibility is compelling enough that there are proposed mechanisms for why this might happen.
What are some of those ideas? How could the immune system be responding this way?
Well, there are a few main theories. One is the infection block hypothesis. The idea is that strong prior immunity might actually block the current vaccine from kicking off a robust new response.
Okay.
Then there's the antigenic distance hypothesis, which is just that if the new vaccine is too different from the old ones, your immune system might just default to its old, less effective responses.
And the third one, which sounds the most complex, is about immune memory.
That's antibody refocusing, or sometimes it's called original antigenic sin. It's a fascinating idea. Basically, when you get the new vaccine, your memory B cells tend to refocus their antibody production on targets from prior strains that they already know really well.
So they're making antibodies for an old enemy, not the new one.
Kind of.
Yeah.
They make cross-reactive antibodies that aren't a perfect match for the new drifted virus. It's an efficient system, but sometimes it chooses the wrong target.
It just underscores the incredible complexity of what we're asking the immune system to do year after year against a constantly moving target like H3N2.
It really does.
So let's wrap this up with the final takeaways. The core conclusion for you, the listener, is that despite all this, the substantial genetic and antigenic changes in Subclade K, the flu shot, still provided moderate, valuable overall protection, 41.3%.
And that moderate protection is the justification for continuing vaccination efforts. But, to maintain that critical thinking, we have to acknowledge the study's limitations.
What were the main ones?
First, they had to rely on self-reported data for comorbidities, which is never ideal. Second, the sample size, while large overall, wasn't quite big enough to estimate VE specifically against only Subclade K infections.
So the VE is against all influenza, which was overwhelmingly K, but not 100%.
Correct. And they used a 3-day symptom onset window for inclusion, which is shorter than some other studies. That might have led to them missing some positive cases, potentially skewing the VE estimate a little bit lower.
So acknowledging all that, what's the core message this study sends to the public health community as they plan for the next season?
It highlights the critical importance of two things: continuous, rapid virological surveillance to spot these emerging subclades like K the moment they appear, and timely, real-world evaluation of vaccine effectiveness. Knowing we have 41% protection, even when mismatched, is vital information. It guides immediate deployment and risk assessment.
I think the most provocative thought here for the listeners is that we often chase this perfect 90% effective vaccine, but this data shows the real value of a moderate win.
That's a great way to put it.
A 41% effective vaccine, when you deploy it to millions of people, still prevents a huge number of illnesses and hospitalizations. It confirms the immediate value of what we have, while also pointing out exactly where our future challenges lie, especially for our most vulnerable older populations.
And if you connect this to the bigger picture, these rapid early season efforts in places like Beijing are foundational. They provide the hard evidence that global bodies like the WHO need as they decide on the composition of next season's shots. This kind of deep dive is exactly how the world tries to stay one step ahead of this constantly shifting virus.
Thank you for sharing your sources and letting us dive deep into this fascinating and complex story.
My pleasure.
Thanks for watching. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to ID Radio.